Hi, everybody, and welcome to COVID Chats. My guest today is Sara Rose. I met Sara at the Chico Hillel during my time on the National Student Exchange in California. After graduation, Sara became a Peace Corps volunteer down in Peru. It was fascinating learning her viewpoint on the pandemic as an American evacuee. I hope you enjoyed this brief pre-Passover episode. And now, without further ado, here is episode 15 of COVID Chats. Hello, Sara, and welcome to episode 15 of COVID Chats.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, a pleasure. Excited to see you. Of course, we met while I was out in Chico, California for that one odd semester in college. It was a great time, of course, not odd in a bad way, but it was just a funny thing to do, to go somewhere else in the States. But it was great. I met a lot of interesting people like you. And part of the reason I wanted to have you on was I know you were in the Peace Corps in Peru, and I read a New York Times article on like the 24th of March or 25th, and it was all about the Peace Corps pulling their volunteers out. So, I'm curious, what was that like for you being asked to leave so abruptly after plans to be there for, 2.5 years? I remember you mentioning over text
Right.
or something.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. I got there in September, and in Peace Corps, you have 3 months of training, in country training, before you get assigned to your village or community. So I officially swore in as a volunteer the end of November.
Hmm.
So I was in Peru from September, then swore in November, and then I got sent to my site. So I was in a tiny community of about, I would say, between 1,000 to 1,500 people, in the region of Amazonas, in like on top of a mountain, pretty much. It was
Cool.
like about 9,000 feet elevation.
Wow.
I really couldn't breathe when I first got there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was only there for about 3.5 months before the evacuation. So my work was just getting started. A little bit about my work, I guess. So I was um, a volunteer in the health sector. So my title, I guess, was community health facilitator. So I was working with the local health agencies. We had a small little health post, no doctors, but about like five like medical technicians and two, like, yeah, two of those were nurses. So I was working with them mostly on anemia, because anemia is a big problem down there, especially in the mountain regions. So anemia with children under 5, and then sexual health in the high school. So I was working mostly with the health posts and the high school, but also a little bit of other like public organizations, government organizations that were already in my community. So yeah,
No doctors. That's a
no
little bit of
doctors.
a concern. Do you feel like the community that you were with are they prepared for this? Have they? What have you been in touch with them at all?
Um, Yeah, I've been in touch with them. There's only one confirmed case as of now in my region.
Hmm.
Most of the cases are in Lima, which is the capital of Peru.
Hmm.
So they're doing pretty well. Peru is like completely shut down. Like you're not even allowed to travel to like the next town. Like any car that's on the road gets stopped pretty much. So they're doing a really good job in terms of control, and they
Right.
were pretty proactive about it. Because when we evacuated, we couldn't even get out of my regional capital for like 4 days because we had to get like special permission from the government. That took
Wow.
a long time. Yeah.
So it sounds like they were pretty proactive, shutting things down ahead
Yeah.
of time. It's really interesting that there aren't many cases in Peru because something I read in that New York Times article was that part of the reason they decided to pull volunteers out was they didn't want to risk stranding them during the pandemic or putting them at more risk. But then if you look at the US, I mean, New York has more cases than Italy, and there's cases in California, there's cases all over the country.
Yeah.
It seems like you might have been safer down there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking, because I was like so rural and so remote. I was like, okay, like no one ever comes here, like let alone tourists. Like they're never
Right.
gonna come here. So I'm like way safer than LA County or Orange County, which is where I am right now. Um, and I really didn't think that Peru was gonna get evacuated. Um, while other Peace Corps countries were evacuating, like first, so first they evacuated Mongolia, China, obviously. China
Sure.
completely shut down their Peace Corps program.
Right. That
It's
makes
never
sense.
going back.
Yeah.
um,
I'd ask you about that too, but yeah.
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 And then
Yeah.
Thailand got shut down, Indonesia got shut down. So mostly Asian countries were
Right.
shutting down, and then a couple in Europe and like Morocco and stuff. But before the global evacuation, so it was just like on a country by country basis. So
Interesting.
specific Peace Corps countries were deciding to evacuate the volunteers based on their country specific situation. So I thought I was completely safe in Peru, especially because they were like being proactive.
Right.
But when it comes to evacuation, it's more about like the health and safety of the volunteers. So where we are as volunteers, it's like mostly rural and like isolated communities where it's hard to find proper health care. And so sometimes if we need something like, but I needed an MRI during my service, and my like Peru Peace Corps doctors flew me to Lima to get that MRI because that's the only place in all of country that I could get one.
Wow.
So it becomes more about like transportation and safety. Whereas like if a volunteer got hurt, say they broke their leg or something, they couldn't get the attention they needed in their site to properly heal and properly recover from an injury or even a sickness. Um, but they couldn't like travel to get that
Right.
attention,
Because everything
so,
would be shut down.
right.
What do people in your village do when they break a leg?
Yeah, they just kind of like make their own splint.
Wow.
Pretty much they go to the health technician and they like do whatever. There was like a hospital in my regional capital, which was about 2 hours away,
Hmm.
that you could go get x-rays at, but yeah,
Yeah. Not
people
the
don't
same
really
as
have the transportation or the resources to do
right.
that kind of thing. Yeah,
Right. And it's not the same care as going to the hospital in Lima, right?
correct. Yeah.
You'll get at least maybe something a little more than a homemade splint, hopefully
Yeah.
a real cast.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that the China program, a little jokingly, might never come back. When do you think the Peace Corps program will be unsuspended and resumed, should I say,
um
if you had to guess?
yeah, we really have no idea. Well, China already before the pandemic, their program was like working on phasing out.
Oh, interesting.
So after this, they just completely shut it down. But as for the rest of the Peace Corps, I really have no idea. I was like attending a webinar on like the next steps yesterday, and they were like, we're definitely not planning on like returning volunteers for this fiscal year. So probably like not until October, September is like the earliest,
Wow.
which sucks.
Yeah. Would
Yeah.
you go back when they?
Yeah, I would love to go back
Mm,
because I was only there for like 6.5 months. And
right.
when I was really planning for something like 2.5 years,
Right. I
they
remember.
really, yeah, cut my plans short. And yeah, honestly, I loved my job and I love my life over there. And I
Yeah.
don't really see myself doing anything else right now at
Mm.
this point. Yeah.
What do you miss most about not being there? Is there any aspect of the volunteering in
I
particular?
miss speaking Spanish.
Spanish?
Yeah. I
Sorry,
miss
breaking up
speaking
a little bit.
Spanish pretty much. And oh, okay, my bad.
It's all right.
Is
No,
it good now?
yeah, yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I miss speaking Spanish, and I miss my counterparts, like the people that I worked with, and mostly my host family.
Mm,
Yeah. So mostly like the life aspect. I like was only in the planning stages of work, so I wasn't actually like able to implement the projects that I had planned with my counterparts yet, but I was definitely excited to do so.
What were some of the, I mean, I'm sure I can guess some of the emotions, but yeah, what was it like that moment when you really found out you had to pack everything up and go? And then you also mentioned it took you 4 days just to even get to, right, the airport, right? So
Yeah,
that must have been crazy. I mean, you're also exposing yourself then, right? Because you're traveling and you're going to be crossing the ocean, and
right.
it's like that must be, were you nervous about that?
Yeah, so what happened was it was like a Sunday that the director of Peace Corps announced the evacuation,
Mm,
and like that whole day I was like, oh, like Peru's not getting evacuated, like we're fine. Um, and then it was like a big surprise to everybody when the director, her name is Jody Olson. So when Jody made this speech, it was like a huge surprise to everyone that she was literally evacuating over 7,000 volunteers
wow.
at that moment. So I don't really have I didn't have like the best service in sight. So like sometimes I would get calls, sometimes I wouldn't.
Mm,
But it was like 11 and I kind of like knew something was happening.
right.
Oh, Jody is going to speak and it's like everyone needs to listen to it. It's going to be important. So it was like 11 and I was like finally able to get a call from my friend, and he basically told me like, oh yeah, this friend was in my region as well. So he's like, oh yeah, like Peace Corps is like evacuating all volunteers in the world. Like you need to be in Chachapoyas, which was our regional capital,
Mm,
before um, before lunch tomorrow. And that was literally like 10 hours or 12 hours
crazy.
that I had to like pack up everything and like say goodbye to everybody. It
Yeah.
really sucked. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like crying the whole night, but yeah.
And have you been in, are you in, maybe I previously asked this, can't even remember, but are you in touch with any of those people, either the host family or people you were volunteering with over there?
Yeah, definitely. So, there was no other volunteers in my site, but obviously, like, you spend the first 3 months with other volunteers in your cohort. There was about 50 volunteers in my cohort. So I'm like really close with a solid group of those, and we talk every day. It's
Mm,
just like my best support system at the moment because no one really knows like what we're going through except for them, you know?
right.
And then as for people in my site, yeah, we use WhatsApp, but
Mm,
there's not really internet
right.
like in my site. There's only like calling and cell service sometimes.
Mm,
So I send them messages and they send me messages back when there is internet, but it's not
right.
often. Yeah.
That's one of the privileges we have, right, with this nice internet connection, these Zoom calls, and
And running water, yeah.
yeah, and running water, and running water. That's true. And they're doing well though when you speak to them for the most part.
Yeah, they're fine. As I said, like Peru is very
That's
proactive and
amazing.
there's only one case in the region, so
Amazing.
yeah.
I wish other governments had followed their lead on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly ours. So, and how's the adjustment been back? I mean, it's crazy to come back to the U.S. where coronavirus is everywhere and the
Right.
economy is going crazy. Like, what do you feel? What do you feel like, and what do you think you're going to do with, this time until the Peace Corps resumes?
Yeah, so it was really weird because during this, while everything was going on here and in the rest of the world, like my life in Peru wasn't affected at all. It was just a topic of conversation at that point, but like everybody was living a normal life pretty much up until like the day I evacuated. Because the same day I evacuated is when Peru like shut everything down. They were like, you have one day to get to like where you need to go, and then you have to stay there forever, but indefinitely. So I was like really disconnected from the outside world pretty much, and like I was reading some articles here and there, but I couldn't actually like conceptualize how it was and how different it would be when I got back.
Mm,
So we were stuck in like a weird limbo in Lima. They like put us all in a hotel because the government pretty much wouldn't let us leave. And they were trying to charter a flight for us for about like a week it took for us to actually leave Lima. Um, so when I got here, I quarantined in an Airbnb um, with 2 other volunteers, which was nice. It would have been really unhealthy probably if I was alone.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I was in Newport Beach, which was really nice. I was by the beach, and I was like kind of surprised that people are still like out and about walking, but I
Yeah.
guess it's good for your mental health.
Right.
So yeah, it was cool being with the 2 other volunteers and kind of like being able to process what we're going through together.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I just finished the 2 weeks of self quarantine, and I just got to my parents' house
Woo.
yesterday, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Did not expect to be here this early, but it's
Right.
nice that they let me stay here and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've just pretty much been looking at jobs, updating my resume. With Peace Corps, you get some benefits like non-competitive eligibility if you apply for government jobs. So I am I like majored in public health, so I'm actually really interested in everything that's going on.
Right.
And the CDC is hiring a bunch of temporary positions. So I'm probably going to apply to some of those
That's cool.
and some COVID specific jobs because I find them interesting,
Yeah.
and see where it takes me if I get them.
Yeah, I mean, this is one
Yeah,
of the best, I guess, use cases of like public health and why we need such good public health and good communication.
right.
It's crazy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Any other thoughts regarding COVID and your experience, or do you feel like you've sort of since you've come back, it's been a process, but is it kind of have you adjusted fully? Would you say?
Yeah, I think there's some things like I went to the grocery store and there was just like way too many choices, even though people are
Mm.
like, there's nothing at the grocery store. Like, there was no grocery stores in my whole region. So it's just like, what's going on?
Right.
But I feel like since I wasn't gone for that long, I was only gone for about 7 months, even a little less, like it has been easier to readjust back to this kind of lifestyle
Mm.
than probably other volunteers are experiencing, like people who have been gone for like over a year, almost 2 years at this
Sure.
point. Um, but yeah, no, it's been all right. Just readjusting back to living with my parents has been harder.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky. My parents actually gave me the space alone and went up to the upstate New York where there's less cases and it's more remote and safe.
Right.
So it's nice being solo, but then it's also, you mentioned you couldn't imagine being solo when you were in that Airbnb because you'd
Right.
go a little crazy. So it's that
Yeah.
fine balance.
Hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on COVID Chats. I mean, this was a great episode, super interesting viewpoint to hear from an actual Peace Corps volunteer. I was piqued. My interest was piqued the moment I read that New York Times article and I thought about you in Peru, and I was just like, man, what was that like? And so thank you so much, Sarah. Are you doing a Seder?
Some family friends.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, enjoy the matzah. Happy Seder. I'm glad you are safe in the U.S. despite potentially being safer down there in Peru.
Yeah.
But I hope you're able to get back to it soon. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.